Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is early for me. Hello, it's me again, the snarky juror. We are now in day 20 of the Massachusetts versus Karen Reed trial. And I hope today is much better than yesterday Monday. Today's Wednesday. I give up. I give up. I give up. I do not understand what the prosecution is doing. I do not understand what they're trying to say. I do not understand all this picture evidence that they put in yesterday. And I guess there's more to come today because that's what they insinuated. I'm officially zoned out. I don't know about anybody else, but I am officially zoned out. So let's go see what they're up to today. Do we have to? That is why I'm here. Someday I'll get this right. Make this bigger. It's bigger. No. It's not nice to groan when you see somebody, but
Sure. Vallier.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your
he's
Honor.
never ready.
Now, Ms. Villier, when we had left off the other day, I believe you had just looked at some photos of item 7-16. Is that correct? If you recall.
I don't
It's
recall.
been a few days.
Approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Is this refresh your memory?
And Ms. Villier, I'm going to show you a series of 6 photographs. I should just review those.
All right. So I'm going to remind both of you to keep your voices up. Mr. Lally, when you're facing the witness and you're this close, I guarantee you nobody behind you can hear you.
Understood.
Yeah, really, Lally. Find the microphone and speak into it. Everybody else has to.
And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's in those photographs?
Yeah.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Photos that I took of item 7-16.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
And how
Your
she
Honor,
knows
Tom
this, I
Maltese
don't
to
know.
introduce in a minute. Exhibits. Can I just see them, please?
Zoning out.
No objection.
And this couldn't be done beforehand? I guess not. What am I doing? This is Ashley Villier. Villier. I don't know. Forensic scientists for Massachusetts State Criminal. They're all criminals.
Your Honor, for the record, those are exhibits 332, 333, 369, 370, 371, and 372. Thank you. 332 and 333, which skipped over. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. With the court's permission, may I have those published for the jury?
Yes.
So we can all take a nap now?
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2059.
Top of an evidence bag.
Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Oh, no, it's the actual evidence.
Yes.
Is that one of the items from 7-16 next to the ruler with the measurements corresponding to that item?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2081.
Oh, so we're skipping all the top of the evidence bag things, which made no sense to me whatsoever.
2061. My apologies.
I guess they have to have this as a foundation for somebody else to come in and say,
Ms. Blair, what's up
well,
on the screen,
we found a
is
fingerprint on
piece
this
from
one.
7-16 that's
Well,
also marked as exhibit
we've got trace
369.
evidence on this one.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Blair, as far as this
I'm guessing.
Particular item is concerned, with reference to sort of the texture of that particular piece of plastic, what, if anything, did you note or observe in reference to that?
I'm sorry, the texture?
I'm sorry, do you have the laser pointer in front of you or no?
Oh, yes.
Now, as far as the surface area of that particular
It's got
plastic,
bumps.
how would you describe it?
It's got the
I mean,
measles.
there are little dots on it. They're not just like dimples of a sort.
Stippling or dimples of some sort on a piece of plastic.
Yes.
And
That's what
as
she
far
just said.
as those stipplings or dimples on the piece of plastic, were those flush with the rest of the plastic? Were they raised a little bit? How were they sort of configured?
I don't recall.
Good answer. Next picture, please.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 20,
Photograph.
forgive me, Your Honor,
Picture.
2064. And again, Ms. Blair, what's up
This
on
one
the
has
screen
the
is now
measles,
marked
too.
as 371. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And that is another piece next to a ruler, essentially memorializing its measurements from item 7-16. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Yes, because then we can hear you on the microphone.
Ms. Blair, I'm showing you another series of 11 photographs. Ask you to look at those until we finish.
Can you tell Mr. Yannetti what those are so he can look at his
Your Honor,
copies?
Counsel was shown each and every one of the photographs prior to the court coming in today. But I'm happy to give them to counsel as well.
I'm just trying to save some time.
Right, I just need to know the particular evidence numbers at the end.
Okay.
Well, they did something ahead of time. Who is he talking to? I don't see Jackson looking at his one.
Do you recognize those?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Photos that I took of item 7-16.
So additional items contained within item 7-16, is that correct?
Yes.
And what's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed during the course of your examination and analysis in regard to item 7-16 in this case?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, the Commonwealth will seek to introduce and admit as the next 11 exhibits.
Any objection?
I'm not going to have an objection, but again, I just need to know what numbers.
I'm not as tuned out as I was planning on being. You know, that's all this is going to be for a while. Let's speed this process up a bit.
Can we just have a moment, Ron?
Mhm.
Exhibits 373 through 383, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, with court's permission, if I could publish some of the photos from this packet for the jury.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2036.
Yeah. More measles.
And Ms. Blair, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 373?
That was one of the photos I just looked at.
And as far as the evidence back containing items from 7-16.
Oh, back to
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2039.
sure don't see it very long. She did this analysis February 16th of 23, a
do.
year after it was collected.
A photo that I took of item 7-16.
And that would be the entirety of the items contained within that evidence pack.
So when was this stuff submitted to
Yes.
her?
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2051.
Did it sit around in evidence lockup for a year before she
And
looked
do
at
you
it?
recognize what's depicted up on the screen?
I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
A photo I took of item 7-16.
In particular, one of the,
Can you speak up a little, sorry, a little bit
Yes.
slower? Thank you.
in particular, one of the red plastic pieces from item 7-16, is that correct?
Yes.
And for the record, Your Honor, that's exhibit 376.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2053. And again, Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit 378?
I do.
What do you recognize?
No,
that?
this doesn't make.
One of the photos that I took of item 7-16.
And lastly, from this batch, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2055. And again, Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit 380?
I do.
And what do you recognize that?
It's one of the photos that I took of item 7-16.
And this particular item up here as exhibit 380, you describe sort of color, shape, what you observed from this particular item.
That's a piece of red and clear apparent plastic.
So a piece of red plastic with a piece of clear plastic sort of within the same piece. Is that fair to say?
Within the same piece?
Yes.
Sorry.
Clear, red, and
apparent plastic. Yes.
apparent plastic. Because we don't even know if it really is plastic and what the composition is, and if it's the type that really goes on a Lexus, and if it says unbreakable, as a lot of people say it is. But they don't know that.
Claire, if you could
We don't know that.
describe for the jury again, just as far as the process that
Can we
you-
put the lights on, Mr. Lally?
Yes, I'm sorry. My apologies, Ron.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Ms. Villier, if you could explain to the jury again, sort of the process that you undertook as far as these various pieces from these various evidence item numbers. What was the process that you undertook as far as doing your comparison?
Botox Prox is added again.
So first of all, everything is documented. Each item is documented separately with photographs, notes. I put a label with the case number, item number, and then A, B, C, etc. If there are multiple pieces in it, a label on each piece. I look at the photos to see if there are any similarities, dissimilarities, to see if there are any potential pieces to compare. And then if I do think that there are pieces that could be compared, I'll open those items and keep them all separate, and then look at them in real time to see if it does actually look like they could be consistent before I bring them close together. And if it still looks like they could be consistent, then I'll bring them together to see if there is an actual mechanical fit, and then I'll document that and look at it under the stereo zoom.
Oh, this is what I
And
got to
the
look for.
device or the instrument that you're looking
The
at.
whole
can you
thing
describe
is
for
going
the
to
jury
be
again what that is?
reconfigured.
So the stereo zoom is also called the stereo microscope. It's a microscope that is on a stand, so you can put larger pieces of evidence underneath it.
Now, as far as that initial sort of looking at things together, are you doing that? How are you sort of organizing that? Is that by item number, by color, or by something else?
It depends on the shape
I did this by color because
and color
it seemed
of
the
piece.
easiest way to organize all of these pieces.
Don't
And then
assume the
within
jury
the
is
individual
stupid.
item number, say just randomly 7-15, for example, are you looking at that? If there's multiple pieces within an item, are you looking at the consistency within the item prior to looking sort of crossing between 715 and 716? Is that the process?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, really.
Very long question. Very confusing, my fault. So, as far as the comparison is concerned, are you looking solely within an item? So, if an item has multiple pieces, are you comparing just those pieces within that item first?
As part of my initial examination, when I'm documenting that item, if there are multiple pieces, I'll compare those pieces first.
And then, if there are any pieces that are consistent, are you then cross-referencing that item's pieces with pieces from a different item?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
More pictures?
Ma'am, I'm showing you another series of 19 photographs.
I'm psychic.
To review those a little bit.
These are images of the actual people. But now we can't tell when we couldn't tell that either. Unless It's a picture of the evidence bag itself, not just the top of it. You can't tell when it was gathered, but supposedly, mostly by Proctor and Bukhenik, or however you say his name. I went back and reviewed some stuff, and they were supposedly gathered around 2, 4, and 6, and 8 of 22. Her figures is dated 23,
And, do you recognize what's contained in those
a
photographs?
year
Ms. Villier?
later.
I do.
And what do you recognize then?
These are photos from my case of either within the same item that had a mechanical fit that I'd then taped together, or of mechanical fits from between different items.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll also seek to introduce in a minute the next exhibits.
No objection, but,
So people who like puzzles are going to really enjoy this.
Right,
I was going to hand them to you after they were off.
that's fine.
I don't know if it's just because it's speeded up, but she don't look happy this morning. And I don't blame her. Oh, yeah. The little bit of the pictures we can see, yeah, she put some pieces together. And by the time we're done, we'll have a whole car sitting there.
Exhibit 384, 402. Thank you.
May I speak to counsel for 1 second?
Before you get to the photos, Ms. Villier, if I could just ask, as far as your analysis was concerned with reference to each of these items, if I could, excuse me, just ask you some questions about that. Starting first with item 3-1, that was the passenger side taillight housing, is that correct?
I believe so.
And you analyzed pieces of that along with the sort of housing unit itself, is that correct?
Oh,
Yeah, only the
do you mean like
glass,
there was,
pigment glass.
there was like the
broken.
taillight, and then there were smaller pieces also in the
Correct.
print? Yes,
And you took measurements of the various pieces that you observed?
I did.
And did you record those within your notes?
I did.
Do you recall what those measurements were?
Not without looking at my notes.
With the court's permission, may the witness refer to our notes?
Yes.
And we need to know this why. Zoned out people want to know.
The witness is ready, Mr. Allen.
And what were those measurements?
Do you want all of them?
Just in yes. I mean, first starting with reference to the taillight housing assembly.
Okay, so the taillight I called piece A in this case, and it measured approximately 14 inches by 9 inches by 8¼ inches.
And then which of the pieces that were contained within that sort of taillight evidence bag did you compare to the taillight housing itself?
So there was a lot of like very, very small pieces that I took pictures of, but they're very, very small, so they were not suitable for comparison, so I didn't look at those. There were some larger pieces that I did that were suitable for comparison, so I did look to see if they fit in with piece A.
And With regard to that analysis of whether or not they fit in with piece A, which of those pieces did you find did fit?
So amongst item 3-1, let's see. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Piece A and piece B fit together mechanically, and then piece A and piece F fit together mechanically.
F is in Frank.
F is in Frank, yes.
It may be pretty apparent, but if you could, Ms. Villier, just expound upon what you mean.
So
when you
3
say they fit
pieces
together
could go together.
So when things
Like a
break,
puzzle.
they break in a unique pattern. Like it's pretty different every time. So a mechanical fit is bringing two things with broken edges together to see if they were originally part of the same item. See if they if the broken edges align, and if they do, then that's a mechanical fit.
Now, turning your attention to item 7-5.
Thanks for
you
the
looked at, those
clarification,
various
because I'm a
pieces,
dumb
together
dumb
as
and
well. Is
wouldn't
that
have
correct?
known that.
I believe so.
And were there any 3 pieces in total from 7-5, so A, B, and C? Is that correct as well?
May I look at my notes? Yes.
And what, if any, match did you find with within item 7-5?
There were no mechanical fits amongst those 3 items, or 3 pieces of the item.
And with reference to item 7-6, there were 2 pieces A and B within that. Is that correct?
May I? Okay. Yes.
And were there any physical matches within those 2 pieces of item 7-6?
No.
Now, turning your attention to item 7-8, do you recall how many pieces were contained within that?
If I may look at my. There were 14 pieces.
And of those 14 pieces, they were each compared to each other. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what, if any, mechanical fit did you find between the pieces contained within 7-8?
So pieces C and D were found to fit together mechanically, and then pieces E and F were found to fit together mechanically.
Martin, may we approach, please?
So they're going to reconstruct the whole thing. The whole thing. And fit it back into the housing that has no dents, no scratches, no malformation of the metal parts. It was just the glass that shattered. This makes sense, does it? I don't think so. What am I trying to do? About the time I do this, they'll be back.
Ms. Villier, turning your attention to item 7-9, you analyzed 3 pieces from that. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You know what, Ms. Villier, you can just look the whole.
Okay. Sorry, could you repeat your question?
How many pieces were contained again within item 7-9?
3 pieces. 7-9.
Yes.
3 pieces.
And what, if any, physical matches did you find contained within that item 7-9?
There were no mechanical fits.
And with reference to 7-10, how many pieces?
Well, we're going to go through everything, aren't we?
1 piece.
And with reference to item 7-11, how many pieces contained within that?
And did the one piece match itself?
6 pieces.
And what, if any, physical matches did you find contained within 7-11?
There were none.
In 7-11, how many different colors of pieces were contained within 7-11?
There was black, red, and colorless apparent plastic.
Now, with reference to item 7-12, how many pieces were contained within?
There were 14 pieces.
And of those pieces, again, how many different colors or how many different colors of pieces were within 7-12?
They were all colorless.
And from those, what, if any, mechanical fits did you observe or did you find within item 7-12?
Okay. So there were 3. Do you want me to say all the pieces that fit together?
Please.
Okay. So pieces B, C, D, F, and K all fit together. Pieces E and I fit together. And pieces M and N fit together.
Now, turning your attention to
Oh,
item 7-13, how many pieces were
interesting.
contained within item 7-13?
3 pieces.
And how many different colors of items were contained within 7-13?
It was red and black apparent plastic.
What, if any, physical matches did you find within item 7-13?
There were none.
Turning your attention to item 7-14, how many pieces were contained within that?
There was 1 piece.
And what color was that one piece?
It was colorless.
And turning your attention to item 7-15, how many pieces were contained within that?
There were 8 pieces.
And as far as those 8 pieces, how many items were of different color? What color were they?
There were red and colorless apparent plastic.
And of those 8 pieces, what, if any, mechanical fits did you find within them?
So piece F and piece H were found to fit together.
And turning your attention to item 7-16, how many pieces were contained within 7-16?
There were 7 pieces.
And of those 7 pieces, what, if any, differences in color were the 7 pieces within 7-16?
It was red and colorless apparent plastic.
So what is the
And of
point
those
of
pieces,
this?
what, if any, mechanical fits did you find within 7-16?
So pieces A, C, and D fit together mechanically.
Now, with reference to those pieces, once you did those inspection from or analysis from
And when were they
individual items,
gathered?
what, if anything, did you do with those individual items? With
And by
reference to taillight housing?
whom?
Um,
And how
So-
long ago?
Before even comparing it to the taillight, I compared all of the questioned items to each other. So that's the 7-5 to 7-19 to see if any of those pieces would fit together. And amongst those, I was able to make 5 larger pieces that I called piece 1 through piece 5.
And of those larger pieces, which of those larger pieces were you able to mechanically fit together prior to comparing them to the taillight housing?
That is perfectly intact.
Sorry, can you?
The
From your
housing
analysis of
itself
those
is
larger pieces
perfectly
and
intact.
analyzing them together with other larger pieces, what, if any, opinions did you draw? What, if any, conclusions did you come to as far as your analysis of those pieces?
Apparent.
So for the larger pieces
Shattered.
amongst like the different items that fit together mechanically, I can see that those items were once a part of the same unit.
And so I guess what I'm asking, Ms. Villier, is with reference to, say, item 7-6 or 7-5, or the items in and of themselves, which of those items were you, if any, were you able to find mechanically fit with each other?
Didn't she say?
Amongst sorry, are you asking me like which specific items made up like piece 1?
Correct.
Okay, I can. Okay. Okay, so piece 1 contained pieces from items 7-5, 7-8, 7-10, 7-11, 7-13, 7-15, and 7-16.
And then, so based on their mechanical fit, what, if any, conclusion did you draw in reference to those several items?
That those specific pieces from all of those items were at one time together as part of a larger unit.
And then, what, if any,
Nicely
comparison or
said.
analysis
I
did
like
you do
that.
of items between item 7-15 and item 7-16?
So pieces from item 7-15 and 7-16 were part of piece 1. I could look through my notes and see if they're a part of any of the other pieces that I fit together.
With the board's permission.
Okay. Shouldn't this have already been discussed? She has a tendency to go, I wonder why.
Okay, so piece 2 consisted of pieces from item 7-15 and 7-16.
And then, with reference to item 7-6 and 7-11, what, if any, what, if anything, did you observe between the pieces of those?
Couldn't they just use one example and
So
then
piece
say-
3 consisted of pieces from item 7-6 and
and
7-11.
make a list? I mean,
Similar to what you had described before with 7-15 and 16, as far as them mechanically fitting together, and now I'm talking about 7-6 and 7-11. What, if any, conclusions did you draw in regard to that?
That those pieces from item 7-6 and item 7-11 were at one time together as a larger unit.
And then, as far as item 7-8, 7-9, and part of 7-16, what, if anything, were you able to do with reference to those?
this could be done so much easier, in my humble biased
So
opinion.
piece number 4 consisted of pieces from item 7-8, 7-9, and 7-16.
But then
And
I don't
as
need to
far as
try to make
mechanically
this look
fitting those pieces
bigger and
together,
more
again, what, if any,
magnificent than
conclusions
it
did you,
is.
come to in reference to those items 7 7.8, 7.9, and 7.16.
That those pieces from item 7-8, 7-9, and 7-16 were at one time together as a larger unit.
Now, lastly, with reference to this, in reference to item 7-12,
Well, please be it
7-14,
lastly.
what, if any, analysis did you do with reference to pieces from those items?
Sorry, which item?
7-12 and 7-14.
I have item 7-11 and 7-12 that fit together for piece number 5.
And Your Honor, with what's now been marked as exhibits 384 through 402, if I could ask to publish some of those to the jury.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2069.
And we have photographic memory, so we will retain all of this.
And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen as now exhibit 384?
I'm getting
I
it.
do.
And what are we looking at here?
Within item 7-16, those are pieces that were mechanically fit together.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2096. And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's now been marked as exhibit 386?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
So that is what I called piece 1. So the piece that is made up of apparent plastic pieces from many of the different items.
2/21/23,
Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just zoom in a little.
February 21st, 23.
What exhibit number is this, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor, this is 386. And from sort of this zoomed in version of 386, Ms. Villier, are you able to now see some of the stickers or the evidence stickers that you put labeling each of these pieces?
Yes.
And if you could just using the way to point out the attention where those pieces in the photograph.
So these labels right here are the labels that I put on each piece individually when I initially examine it. So all of the little white labels.
Kind of hard to do if the label's bigger than the piece.
Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen? What is now been marked as exhibit 387?
I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's what I was wondering.
That's still piece 1. It's just from a different angle.
I was wondering if it was raised. Because that tail light wraps around.
Ms. Gilman, if I can have 2101. And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen now that has been marked as exhibit 390?
I do.
What are we looking at here?
That's still piece 1 from another photo taken from another angle.
In order to have all those
And Ms. Gilman,
pieces
if I could have 2103.
be
Ms.
from
Villier, do you recognize
striking
what's up on
a
the screen?
human
It's now been marked
being,
as exhibit 392.
that
do.
human being would have so many broken bones.
That is another angle of piece 1.
And the vehicle
Ms. Gilman,
had
if
to
I
have
could
been
have
going at extremely
photograph
high speed,
2107.
in my humble biased
Ms.
opinion.
Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit
Oh, there's the
395?
measles pieces.
I do.
And what are we looking at in exhibit 395?
May I look at my notes?
Sure.
Okay.
See, those are her initials down there.
Okay. So that is piece 2.
And this is a year after
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you one.
everything was collected, allegedly.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just zoom in a little bit on the stickers on this photograph. And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit 398?
I do.
What do you recognize that?
That is piece 3.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2111. And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom into the stickers. Thank you. Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit 399?
The more
I
they
do.
show, the
What do you
more,
recognize that
the
to be?
less sense
That is
any of this
piece
makes.
4.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2113. Again, if you could zoom in just a little. And Ms. Villier, do you recognize what's up on the screen now that's been marked as exhibit 401?
I do.
What do you recognize that?
That is piece 5.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
So, Ms. Villier, earlier I'd put before you another 23 photographs. Do you recognize what's depicted in those 23 photographs?
I do.
What do you recognize that?
That's comparisons between item 3-1 and piece 1.
And item 3-1 again was the tail light. Is that correct?
Correct.
Your Honor,
Isn't that
what
what we're talking
comment
about?
Proceed to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
Okay.
I think Mr. Yanati. I can't. Yannetti has sinus issues. I didn't do that, did you? I suppose we could. Every time I go to fast forward, I screw it up. Oh, look at that. Did you see what I see? That's what he's leading to. They reconstructed the whole damn thing.
34 yards. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I may publish some of these photographs for the jury.
Yes.
He could have done this in such a more streamlined.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph
You know the
2156.
judge is going to make the defense streamline.
Blair, do you recognize what's now up on the screen has been marked as Exhibit 403?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's one of the photos comparing item 3-1 and piece 1.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2125.
Where'd it go?
And Ms. Blair, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as Exhibit 411?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the contents of item 3-1.
And that's prior to you. At what stage of this analysis or comparison process is that?
So that's when I initially looked at item 3-1.
And this was March 9th of 23.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2150. And Ms. Blair, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as Exhibit 431?
I do.
And what are we looking at in 431?
So on the left is item 3-1, piece A, and then on the right is piece 1.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2151. And Ms. Blair, do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as Exhibit 432?
I do.
What are we looking at in 432?
That is piece 1 on top of item 3-1 in mechanical fit.
Is that the mechanical fit that you were talking about earlier?
Ah, the
Yes.
double layer.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can take that now.
But interesting. If that's
Thank you.
part of the housing that they're fitting it on top of?
Ms. Villier, in reference to those items that you testified to earlier in item 3-1, the taillight housing, what, if any, conclusions regarding those items as far as the physical match? What, if any, conclusions did you come to?
That item 3-1 and the pieces that make up piece 1 were at one time together as a larger unit.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Have we put on?
This is a bunch of BS. No. She did an excellent job. Look at that. But they're on top of each other. The dark part of the top left, is that the metal framework? And if it is, how
Good
come
morning.
it's not bent and twisted and contorted?
You have testified that when evidence comes into the crime lab, it's given crime lab evidence or item numbers, correct?
It's given a case number, and then each piece of evidence gets its own individual item number.
Okay, and if you can just keep your voice up because we want to make sure that the last jurors here can hear you. Consistent with that policy, the evidence that your lab received in this case was also given those item numbers, correct?
Correct.
So I'd like to ask you about one particular item number in this case, 7-18.18. Would you agree with me, and feel free to check your records, but would you agree with me that that was the item number given to, quote, debris from orange t-shirt and gray long sleeve shirt, end quote?
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay.
And again, it's 7-18.18.
Debris from orange t-shirt 7-17 and gray long sleeve shirt 7-18-JO.
Terrific. Item 7-18.18 did not include the orange t-shirt itself, correct?
No.
Believe that you just testified that was given a different item number, which was 7-17?
I believe so.
And 7-18-18 also did not include the gray long sleeve shirt either, correct?
I didn't look at 7-17 or 7-18. I only received the debris from.
Okay, well, yeah, that's my point. So with regard to the orange t-shirt and the gray long sleeve shirt, those were given separate item numbers, and you examined what was the debris allegedly from those shirts, right? 7-18.18, correct?
Correct.
And that debris consisted of different categories, did it not?
There were different different things inside of it, yes.
Yes, different categories of things, correct?
I'm sure.
All right, so one category was dirt and debris, correct?
Yes,
You did not test the dirt and debris, correct?
correct.
Another category was, or were, I should say, several apparent hairs.
Yes,
And you did not test those hairs, correct?
correct.
And another category, I believe you've already testified to, consisted of several pieces of red apparent plastic and one piece of clear apparent plastic that measured 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch. Is that accurate?
Okay, so there were several pieces of red apparent plastic and then one piece of clear apparent plastic measuring approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch, yes.
Okay. And I apologize for continually reminding you, but I'm just mindful that everybody needs to hear you. So to the best you can, if you can just keep your voice up, I'll try to do the same. So when those several pieces of apparent red plastic and one piece of apparent clear plastic came into your possession, those pieces were obviously not embedded in either shirt when you examined them, correct?
I don't know. I didn't examine the shirt.
Well, so to my question, the pieces that you saw were not embedded in a shirt when you examined them, correct?
Correct.
And again, that's because you never took possession of any shirt in this case, correct?
Correct.
The pieces were loose and they were not embedded in anything, correct?
The pieces were, well, I examined the debris from the shirt. I don't know what the person who packaged it did to collect that.
Okay, and so it goes without saying that you never saw those pieces on either the orange shirt or the gray long sleeve shirt, correct?
I did not.
And you obviously had no control over how the evidence was handled before it came into your possession, correct?
We have a chain of custody in the laboratory, but I did not follow the evidence as it went through the chain.
Okay, and we'll talk about the chain of custody in a minute. Before this evidence came into your possession, you did not witness who seized it, correct?
Correct.
You did not witness who handled it, correct?
Correct.
Before it came into your possession, you don't know who had access to that evidence, correct?
So all of our evidence is stored in locked facilities.
Right, but I guess let me modify that question. Before it came to your lab, you don't know who had access to that evidence, correct?
Correct.
You also don't know, before it came to your lab, whether the shirts in question were at all times kept separate from the red or clear plastic pieces of, well, I said pieces of plastic that were in the possession of certain members of the state police, correct?
Correct.
The chain of custody at the crime lab started with noting the state trooper who actually delivered the evidence to your lab, along with the date, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. The chain of custody at the crime lab starts with noting which state trooper delivered the evidence to your lab and the date that he or she delivered it, correct?
Or a crime scene responder, but the person who drops off the evidence to the laboratory, yes.
Okay. And in this case, which particular state trooper delivered the orange t-shirt and gray long sleeve shirt to your crime lab?
I don't know.
Well, which state trooper delivered the pieces of red and clear plastic pieces, I should say, that you just testified about?
The item 7-5 to 7-19?
Right. The several pieces of red apparent plastic and one piece of clear apparent plastic measuring 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch. That's what I'm referring to.
Wait, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. You understand what I'm talking about, right? In terms of the several pieces of red apparent plastic and then the one piece of clear plastic that you have the measurements for?
You're talking about the apparent plastic that I noted in the debris of 7-18.18?
Correct. Which state trooper was it that delivered that?
Do you know?
Sorry, that's an odd question.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if you want her to repeat it, Ms. Giannetti. Go ahead. You have to repeat that, please.
So evidence is
No,
submitted to
what you just said that he missed.
Oh, I said that's kind of an odd question.
Oh, not for me.
So
Do you have a record of that?
a record of what?
A record of which state trooper delivered that debris to the lab?
So it wouldn't be delivered as like debris. It would be delivered as the individual piece of clothing, which then got assigned item 7-18, I believe. And then as someone analyzes it, each offshoot of that piece of evidence gets a 7-18 point something. So the debris collected from that shirt is 7-18.18.
Okay, all right. Listen, when those several, actually, let me strike that. Get to where I was.
Take your time, Ms. Giannetti.
Okay, so I want to confirm with you that when you were assigned to this case, you were aware that the date of the incident was January 29th of 2022, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it's your testimony that you don't know which state trooper delivered the shirts to the lab, correct?
I could look at my notes because I have a printed chain of custody.
Sure. If you would check your notes for that, please.
Okay. So. Okay, so submission 7, which is everything that's item 7- in this case, was submitted by Trooper Michael Proctor, I believe.
Oh, that was the answer to my
Okay.
question. Thank you. How long after January 29th of 2022, according to your records, did Michael Proctor deliver that clothing to the crime lab?
It was delivered on March 14th, 2022.
Okay, so about 6 weeks or so after January 29th, is that accurate?
Sure.
Given that your lab received this evidence on March 14th of 2022, you can't testify to the chain of custody of the clothing or the pieces of plastic prior to March 14th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
And except for the tail light housing that was seized by Maureen Hartnett, except for that, your chain of custody at the lab for the 2 shirts plus the pieces of plastic in 7-18.18, that began on March 14th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
So between January 29th of 2022 and March 14th of 2022, you do not know what Michael Proctor did or didn't do with the orange t-shirt and gray long sleeve shirt, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I don't know.
And that's
Now, I'd like to discuss with you, if I might, Michael Proctor's submissions of the pieces of plastic that you've testified about. Your lab received from Michael Proctor several different evidence bags containing red, clear, and black pieces of plastic, correct?
Correct.
Some of those evidence bags contain relatively small pieces of plastic in them, correct?
Correct.
And some of those evidence bags contained larger pieces, right?
Correct.
The evidence bags that you received listed the dates of recovery of those pieces of plastic, did they not?
I believe so.
And the evidence bags that you received also listed the officer who recovered the plastic pieces, right?
I believe so.
And again, when you receive those evidence bags, whatever numbers are on them, your lab assigns them your item number, correct?
Correct.
So I'd like to ask you first about item number 7-8. Do you have a record of that?
Yes.
Now, that evidence bag, item number 7-8, contained multiple pieces of red, black, and clear pieces of plastic, correct?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Contained 14 pieces of red, black, colorless, and silver colored apparent plastic. Yes.
Okay. And the date of collection was February 3rd of 2022?
Go ahead.
Okay. Item 7-8,
Yes.
February 3rd, 2022.
Okay. And that was, if you have that in front of you, that was also collected by a trooper named DeChico, correct?
Oh, yes, correct.
If I may approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
a new name. Haven't heard that one yet.
So I show you a photograph. Can you identify what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
That is the handwritten label on item 7-8.
That would have been the evidence bag that your lab received and gave item number 7-8 to it, correct?
Correct.
And that appears to be an exact, photograph.
I don't think
of the
there's an
actual bag.
objection to it, so we
Yeah,
can
that's
just put
true.
it
Okay. May I offer that, Your Honor?
in. Sure.
Then why did Lally mention it every time?
Exhibit
A
430.
true and accurate representation.
May I display that for the jury, Your Honor?
Okay.
And this is that is what I just showed you on the screen, correct?
Correct.
And that's where it's indicated what the date of collection was and which trooper collected it, correct?
Correct.
All right, we can turn the lights on for a minute. And you would agree with me that that date, February 3rd of 2022, was only 5 days after the January 29th blizzard, correct?
I don't recall the dates of blizzards, but
Oh, okay. Well,
sorry.
let's put it the date of the incident. You had
Okay.
previously testified that was January 29th, correct?
correct.
All right. And February 3rd was 5 days after that, right?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to show Exhibit 279, please. Which is 3 days.
Okay.
Now, Exhibit 279, which is displayed on the screen now, this is one of the photos taken of some of the contents of item 7-8, is it not?
That's the entirety of the contents of item 7-8.
Okay. You would agree with me that those were the pieces that were inside that evidence bag labeled February 3rd as the date of recovery 5 days after January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you see that there are some relatively small pieces that were allegedly found on February 3rd, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, Your Honor, I'm continually showing photographs. We can turn the lights on and off, whatever the court's preference
So
is.
you can just tell the code officer when you want the lights turned.
Okay, all right. So they get turned on for like a question or two, and then I turn them back off. But
However you want to do it.
that's fine. All right, so I'd like to contrast some of those pieces with some of the pieces that were found days and weeks later by Michael Proctor. And I'd like to start first with item 7-13.
Ooh.
This is, I'd like to display exhibit 343, which, Mr. Bates, is item 5. Okay, all right. You were previously asked about exhibit 343, which is now displayed on the screen.
Yes.
And that is the first evidence bag submitted by Trooper Proctor, is it not?
So in mine, sorry.
And you know, let me rephrase that. He submitted evidence bags all at one time, correct?
Yes.
All on 314. So when I said the first evidence bag, I meant the earliest date of collection. I should have asked it that way. February 8th of 2022.
Sure. I don't know all of the dates that each item was collected on.
Okay, but in any case, those, according to the evidence bag that you received, the contents of that bag, which were, again, pieces of plastic, correct?
Apparent plastic.
Pieces of apparent plastic.
Pieces of apparent plastic. Those were found 5 days after the pieces that you previously testified were found by the Chico, right, on February 3rd?
Correct.
All right. And February 8th was now 10 days after January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Can I have displayed exhibit 346, which is 5A? Okay, looking at exhibit 346, you will agree with me that this particular piece found on February 8th by Trooper Proctor was quite a bit larger than many of the plastic pieces that had been found by Trooper DeChico 5 days earlier on February 3rd, correct?
I mean, there were a variety of sizes of pieces on the other one, but that is what is that, approximately 4-ish inches?
Right, but my point is, exhibit 346, what's displayed, that plastic piece, is quite a bit bigger than the small pieces that were contained in DeChico's collection, correct?
Then some of those pieces, yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to move on to item 7-15, and if I could show exhibit 352, please, which is item 8, Mr. Bates.
Proctor. 211.
Item 7-15, the evidence bag that supports that lists the law enforcement officer who recovered the plastic pieces as Trooper Michael Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And the date of recovery of those pieces was February 11th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
And again, hearkening back to DeChico's evidence bag from February 3rd, this is now 8 days later that these pieces are found, correct?
Correct.
And it's now almost 2 weeks that these pieces are found after January 29th, right? 13 days?
Correct.
All right, if I could show exhibit 355, which is 8A, Mr. Bates. You would
Another
agree
big
with
piece.
me that this particular piece found by Trooper Proctor on February 11th is also quite a bit larger than those small pieces that were contained in Trooper DeChico's evidence collection, correct, on February 3rd?
Correct.
All right, I'd like to move on to item 7-16, which is number 9, Mr. Bates.
What exhibit number is this, Mr. Chairman?
And this has not yet been introduced, so I'm about to introduce it. And in fact, why don't I do that first?
Okay.
If I can approach the witness.
Sure. And there's no objection to this, Mr. Lally?
No, Your
Okay.
I'll just have the witness identify it and then offer it. Do you recognize what that photo depicts that I've handed to you?
I do.
What is it?
The handwritten label from item 7-16.
Okay. I would offer that, Your Honor.
Okay.
Exhibit 436.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I can display exhibit 436, which is number 9.
Sure.
And again, you just identified that as the bag supporting item 7-16, correct?
Correct.
That also lists the law enforcement officer who recovered the plastic pieces as Trooper Michael Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And the date of recovery of those plastic pieces was February 18th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
So Trooper Proctor is now finding these pieces over 2 weeks after the smaller pieces were found by Trooper DeChico, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
February 18th is nearly 3 weeks after January 29th, is it not?
Correct.
All right. If I could show exhibit 370, I'm sorry, 380, which is 9A, Mr. Bates. You would agree with me that this particular piece found by Trooper Proctor on February 18th
5
is
inches.
also quite a bit larger than those smaller plastic
Oh, 4
pieces
inches.
found by Trooper DeChico on February 3rd, correct?
Correct.
This one appears to be about 11 centimeters long,
Um,
Not quite.
approximately.
No.
sure.
Oh,
All right.
yeah.
If I could show Exhibit 376, which is 90.
Those big pieces should have been the first things seen.
Okay. And you would agree with me that this particular piece found by Trooper Proctor on February 18th is also quite a bit larger than those smaller plastic pieces found by Trooper DeChico back
That
on
piece
February
is
3rd,
huge.
correct?
Correct.
In fact, that appears to be larger than the piece that you just identified
It's over
in
6
Exhibit
inches.
380, correct?
The one that was just on the screen?
Right.
Yes.
This one appears to be maybe about 18 centimeters long. Does that seem accurate?
I mean, it's longer than the ruler.
Okay, yeah. And finally, if we could show Exhibit 378, which is 9C, Mr. Bates. You would agree with me that this particular piece found by Trooper Proctor on February 18th is even larger than the last one that we just saw, correct?
In length, yes.
Okay. This appears to be about 19 centimeters long.
I mean, longer than the ruler that's up there.
Okay.
But I have the actual measurement in my notes.
Sure. Well, and the precise measurement's not important. I'm just getting at the relative comparison. This one's certainly quite a bit larger than the smaller pieces found by Trooper DeChico back on February 3rd, correct?
Correct.
This larger piece of red plastic, like the previous two that you just identified, were all found on February 18th, about 3 weeks after January 29th, correct, according to your records?
Correct.
And regarding these last 3 evidence bags, labeled item number 713, 715, and 716 in February of 2022, from February 8th to the 18th, those were all plastic pieces collected by Michael Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And in addition to collecting those pieces,
You turn the lights on, Ms. Giannetti?
yes, I'm sorry,
Okay. And we can take that down, please?
yes. In addition to collecting those plastic pieces on all those different days, Michael Proctor was also the person to hand deliver those last 3 evidence bags, all on March 14th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
And you do not know what Michael Proctor did or didn't do with those evidence bags of pieces of taillight prior to March 14th of 2022 when your lab received them, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to sustain it. We've already asked that.
Now, the taillight of that Lexus sits in the housing of the Lexus, the taillight housing, such that part of the taillight faces the rear of the car and part of the taillight loops around and faces the passenger side of the car, correct?
Sure.
Right, because it's on the corner.
Sure. Yeah.
You'd agree with me that once you received the final pieces of taillight from Michael Proctor on March 14th, or once your lab received that, you were then able to piece together a majority of the taillight, correct?
So I wasn't assigned this case until later, once everything had already been submitted to the laboratory.
Right. So it was true that after Michael Proctor submitted these pieces of taillight on March 14th, it was after that that you were able to do the reconstruction that you testified about, correct?
Correct.
If I could have Exhibit 432 displayed, which is image 2151, Mr. Bates. That is the reconstruction, the final reconstruction that you were able to do, correct? You would agree with me that there's one section of that taillight that was missing completely, correct?
Correct.
And that missing section is noticeably visible in your reconstruction, is it not?
Yes,
And do you still have that laser pointer there?
I do.
Would you please point to the section of taillight that's missing? Okay. Appears to be a hole on the upper left side of that exhibit.
Is that a question?
Yes, it actually was. I
Okay.
should have said right or correct, but I didn't.
Yes.
Okay. And you would agree with me, and if we could zoom back out, Mr. Bates, you would agree with me that the portion of taillight that you did not have was strictly on the rear side of the taillight, if I can call it that.
I am not sure what orientation that goes on to a car.
But in any case, to this day, you do not know where the pieces that make up that whole are or what happened to them, correct?
I do not.
I may have a moment.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Hey, at least John's brother isn't glaring as intently as he had been.
Now, Ms. Villier, in reference to item 7-17 and 18, the orange t-shirt and the gray sweatshirt, fair to say you never actually physically saw those items, correct?
The clothing? No, I did not.
Now, the debris that was provided, are you familiar with how that process or who got those debris items from those clothing items?
I can look at my notes and tell you who submitted it or who transferred it to our unit.
If you could.
Your witness is ready, Mr. Lally.
I'm sorry. And
Pay
from your review,
attention, Lally.
Maureen Hartnett.
Now, as far as the
Jeez.
1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch red and clear apparent plastic pieces that you observed within that debris, that was mixed in with other debris as far as dirt, fibers, things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch pieces that were contained within that debris, was that something that you observed visually or microscopically or both?
So visually, I take overall pictures of the debris, and then I'll look through the stereo zoom to see if there's anything that
Stands out.
looks different, and then I'll take a picture of that. So that is what I did. I looked through the stereo zoom.
Now, as far as the collection of evidence, fair to say you don't know who was a trooper, who was there when they were collected, how many troopers were there when it was collected, anything to do with that, fair to say?
Yes.
And as far as the pieces that you testified to, as far as fitting them mechanically together, all of those pieces then fit mechanically onto the taillight housing taken from the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Nothing on that.
All right, Mr. Villier, you are all set. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she can breathe deeply now.
All right. Joyce, do you want to take a morning break now? Or wait? Yeah, people are saying yes, so we'll take the morning break now.
All rise to the court, please.
Morning break. Where's my morning break? How's that? Meanwhile, I'm going to see if I can find us when we come back.
You are muted.
I'm sorry, I stopped talking, didn't I? Take a stretch, relax, go get a drink. Non-alcoholic, it's too early in the day.
Step right up there. Just watch your step on me.
Okay, we have a new poison coming in. Okay, did we stretch enough? Do we feel better? We more relaxed? I'm not. I hope you are. Okay. Somebody new is coming to the stand.
You solemnly swear the answer to the court and jury is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Good to see you.
It's on the lowest setting.
I really need you to keep your voice up.
Okay. So who is this? This is number 54. Witness number.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Sure. It's Christina Hanley. Hanley is spelled Hanley.
And what do you do for work, ma'am?
I am a forensic scientist at the Massachusetts State
Another
Police
one.
Crime Laboratory.
And how long have you been at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory?
I have been there for approximately 16 years.
Now, ma'am, if I could ask you just a little bit about your educational background, starting with where did you go and what any degree did you receive
I'll bet you
with regard to your undergraduate?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science
you might be
in chemistry with a concentration in forensics from Merrimack College.
And then after receiving those degrees from Merrimack, where did you go from there?
I began working at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in 2008.
I prefer to skip through this, but
From your work there in 2000.
they're laying a foundation.
So I began as a chemist 1 in the drug identification unit. Once I completed my training in there, I was promoted to a chemist 2. In 2009, I transferred into the trace unit as a chemist 2, which is the equivalent of a forensic scientist 2 currently. And in 2017, I was promoted to a forensic scientist 3 in the trace arson and explosives unit.
And if you could describe for the jury sort of the difference between
Oh,
forensic scientist,
he's a
chemist 1,
supervisor.
scientist 2, forensic scientist 3 within your lab.
Sure. So forensic scientist 2 is
And Ashley mentioned her.
considered like a bench analyst working on casework.
Hey,
Forensic-
Ms. Hanley, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up really loud, okay?
A forensic scientist 3 is a unit supervisor, and I also perform casework.
And how long is it you've been a forensic scientist 3 or a supervisor within the trace unit?
I have been a supervisor since 2017 for approximately 7 years.
Keep your voice up, please.
Now, Ms. Hanley, with reference to just starting in general terms with trace unit, if you could describe to the jury what is the trace unit and what type of analyses are done within that unit.
Sure. So
Like we
the type
don't
of
already know.
examination that we do in the trace arson and explosives unit, I examine and compare trace evidence such as paint, fibers, hair, glass, tape, miscellaneous items, and I also do physical match examinations as well as serial number restorations on firearms.
What type of training did you receive at the lab?
So I received in-house training as well as some external training. The in-house training consisted of required readings, exercises, observing other analysts working on casework in the lab. I was required to successfully complete a written exam, a competency test, and a mock trial.
And if you could describe to the juries for what your duties and responsibilities are with your current position at the lab.
Sure. So I'm responsible for the daily operations in the unit, training other new analysts in the unit. I perform technical and administrative reviews of case files. I also work on casework, like I had mentioned, examining trace evidence such as paint, fibers, hairs, glass, tape, miscellaneous items, and physical match examinations and serial number restorations on firearms.
And was your lab, the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, is that accredited somehow?
Yes, it is.
And can you describe to the jury what that accreditation means, essentially?
Sure. So an accreditation, it's a formal recognition that the lab is in compliance with certain accreditation requirements.
And is the lab that you work for, is that currently up to code or up to speed with regard to accreditation?
Yes.
Now, as far as you mentioned that you work as a supervisor and review other people's casework, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, when it comes to this specific area, as far as trace analysis or comparison of items, who, if anyone, reviews your work?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
When it comes to this type of analysis, as far as comparison of items, who is it that reviews your work?
So depending on the type of case, currently we do have an external technical reviewer who is authorized to perform that technical review.
And is that external review, is that essentially as a result of there's no one else at the lab that can do what you do?
With some of the disciplines that I perform casework in, I am the only one. So when I do those types of cases, we utilize an external technical reviewer.
Now, are you familiar with a proficiency test?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that is and how that plays into either your work at the lab or the accreditation process that the lab goes through?
Sure. So a proficiency test monitors an analyst's performance. It's a quality assurance process, and I am required to complete at least one external PT annually. Due to the multiple subdisciplines in TRACE, I do typically perform or complete more than one proficiency test per year.
And are the proficiency tests that you take, are they required by the accrediting body, ANAP?
Yes.
And have you passed each of those proficiency tests that you've undertaken over the years?
I have successfully completed my proficiency tests.
Now, turning your attention to this case, at some point, did you become involved in an analysis in reference to a lab case number 22-02184?
Yes.
And the name of the suspect on that is Karen Reed, is that correct?
Got to keep
Correct.
stressing that, don't you?
And if you could,
You stress
describe
that,
to
we'll
the,
stress Proctor.
Jury, again, just in a general sense, in any sort of case, when items come into your possession at the lab, how is that done, and sort of what do you do with those items when you first receive them?
Sure. So evidence is submitted to the lab through the evidence unit. It's assigned a unique lab number and barcode. The information for the case is input into our LIMS system, which stands for Laboratory Information Management System. And a chain of custody of the items is tracked in that LIMS system. When I take an item into my custody, I then document it with photos and notes. And then I proceed with sampling and microscopic examination and instrumental analysis.
Now, specifically when it comes to, you mentioned you have a variety of sort of subdisciplines or different types of testing or casework that you do, is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically as it applies to an analysis or an examination of items of glass. What, if any, experience or what types of cases would you say
Parent
that you have
glass.
looked at those types of items in the past?
So I have examined glass numerous times from a variety of different types of cases. For example, a hit and run or a B&E.
Or what?
And as far as the types of, are there different types of glass that you've performed examinations on in the past as well?
I don't think she understands what
There,
you're asking.
yes, I mean, there could be a variety of type of glass that I could come across for examination.
And with respect to examination of glass, what are some of the steps, or what is the process, or what, if any, instrumentality are you using to conduct your examination?
Sure. So when I examine an item that is glass, I document it with photos and notes, making general observations of appearance, color. I examine a portion microscopically and observe certain optical properties. And then I will also check to see if it fluoresces under UV light. And I also will sample it for analytical analysis using a GRIM, which stands for Glass Refractive Index Measurement.
If you could explain to the jury the GRIM device, how does that work?
Sure. So it measures the refractive index. Refractive index. Your sample is placed into an oil of a known refractive index, and that then gets placed onto a hot stage of the microscope of the GRIM instrument. And it goes through a process of cooling and heating, and it looks for the match point temperature. And from that match point temperature, we're able to determine the refractive index of the glass sample.
Now, as far as that determination of the refractive index of a glass sample, how is that? Is that something that you're viewing, and how are you viewing it? What are you viewing from?
Weren't you listening?
It's viewed through the software that the GRIM instrument uses.
And how does that appear as far as visually when you're looking?
So it essentially, you watch the
There's a
cooling
readout.
and heating process of the sample, like I had mentioned, and it determines the match point temperatures, and it takes an average, and it then calculates the refractive index for the sample.
Now, is there another device that you utilize in the lab called an FTIR?
Yes,
And can you explain, first of all, what that term stands for?
sure. It stands for Fourier Transform Infrared Spectrometer. Sorry.
And what is that device and how is that used in your examination?
So it's an analytical technique that's used for certain types of analysis. Basically, your sample is exposed to infrared light and it reacts in a certain way. And what's produced is what we call a spectrum or a graph. And it's just a series of peaks and valleys that are representative of the sample.
Now, turning your attention back to this case, 22-02184, starting with, were there some glass pieces that you examined in reference to that case?
Yes.
And what were the item numbers associated with the glass pieces that you examined in this case?
Sure. So the item numbers it was item 3-2, 3-3, 7-12, and 7-14.
And if you recall, as far as starting with item 3-2, how was there any other sort of label associated with that beyond just item 3-2?
3-2 was a clear, apparent drinking glass.
And item 3-3?
Item 3-3, I believe, was the clear, apparent glass pieces recovered from the bumper of the vehicle.
And then item 7-12?
That was some clear, apparent glass that was recovered. It was recovered from the ground.
In the ground at 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
Yes.
And lastly, item 7-14?
7-14 was also a clear, apparent piece of glass that was recovered from the road.
Now, with reference to item 3-2, the drinking glass, what, if any, observations did you make or did you note during the course of your examination of that?
Sure. So it appeared to have broken, irregular edges, and that was all I had noted at that point.
Did you take measurements as far as height and width?
I did.
Do you recall what those were?
I would need to refer to my notes for that.
Yes. you should.
So the diameter of the bottom of the drinking glass was 2 3/4 inches. Approximately 2 3/4 inches, and it measured approximately 2.5 inches in height.
In addition to the measurements that you took, what, if anything else, did you note as far as the interior and the exterior of that glass cup?
That there was some dirt debris material noted on the exterior and interior of that item.
Now, as far as item 3-3, the apparent glass on the rear bumper of the vehicle, what, if any, observations or measurements did you take in reference to that, or how many pieces were there?
Sure. So it consisted of 5 clear pieces of apparent glass, with broken irregular edges. The largest piece measured approximately 7/8 of an inch by 5/16 of an inch, and the smallest piece measured approximately 3/16 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch.
Now, within those 5 pieces in items 3-3, were they then given each of those pieces respectively an additional label or marker?
Yes.
And was that an alphabetical one, essentially A through E?
Yes, I labeled them A through E.
Now, with regard to piece E from item 3-3, what, if anything, in addition, did you do with regard to that piece?
So what I labeled as piece E, I also used the Grimm instrument for analytical instrumentation.
Now, with regard to item 7-12, or the 14 pieces of glass and clear plastic, what, if anything, did you observe in your initial observations or initial examination of those pieces individually?
So in item 7-12, it consisted of 5 pieces of clear apparent plastic, and 9 pieces of clear apparent glass, all with broken irregular edges.
Now, specific to the 9 pieces of broken glass, what, if any, examination did you do of them initially?
So the 9 pieces of apparent glass were examined microscopically.
Now, lastly, with regard to item 7-14, the pieces of glass recovered from 34 Fairview Road, what, if any, did you note during your initial examination of them and observations did you make in regard to them?
Sure. So item 7-14 consisted of 1 clear piece of apparent glass with broken irregular edges.
Now, as far as the microscopic appearance, so when you're putting something under the microscope and you're looking at what kind of things are you looking for? What kind of characteristics are you looking for when you're examining something microscopically?
So I look at several things. So initially, I look at the color, whether there are like flat, smooth surfaces to the glass, whether it's flat or curvature. And then I may sample some more to examine under a polarized light microscope and check to see if there are certain optical properties under a polarized light microscope that are characteristic of glass.
And in addition to looking at each of these items individually, then what, if any, comparison did you do between those various items 3-2, 3-3, 7-12, and 7-14?
So between those items, I first examined them to see if there was a physical match between item 3-2 and item 7-12 and 7-14. And then I also did a comparison of 3-2 to item 3-3. And then I also compared item 3-3 to 7-14 for possible physical match. And in addition, I also sampled some pieces for use for examination on the GRIM instrument.
Let me ask you.
So can you
This is where
tell what type of
classification goes.
apparent
Familiar
glass
with
it is?
terms as far as a class characteristic versus an individual characteristic?
Yes.
Can you explain what those terms mean and how they relate to each other within your specific forensic field?
Sure. So a class characteristic is when a material can be associated with a group of items that share characteristics. Like for example, fibers or tape. An individual characteristic is when a material can be associated with a single source, for example, a physical match.
Now, with reference to your analysis
What
between
about
items
composition?
3-2 and 7-12, what, if any, conclusions were you able to draw from your examination or comparison of those items?
Sure. So, right, there are several items that I'll just have to refer to my conclusion, if that's okay, on my report.
Yes, you can go ahead and look at your notes.
Yes. So item 3-2 was found to have a physical match with 6 of the pieces of clear apparent glass from 7-12. But there was no physical match with the 3 other pieces from 7-12.
Based on that physical match that you determined, what, if any, conclusions can you come to with regard to those items that were physical?
Sure. So item 3-2 and the 6 pieces from 7-12 were at one time together as one unit. So then item 3-2 and all 9 pieces from item 7-12 were examined microscopically. However, there was no physical match found with the piece of clear glass from 7-14. Item 3-2 and all 9 pieces of clear apparent glass from 7-12 were examined microscopically, but no physical match was found with 2 of the pieces from the clear apparent glass from item 3-3.
Now, with reference to item 3-3 and item 7-14, what, if any, comparison examination were you able to do in reference to that?
Sure. So item 3 so two of the clear glass pieces from 3-3 were examined microscopically. No physical match was found with the piece of clear glass from item 7-14. One of the pieces that I had labeled as piece E from item 3-3 was found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties with examined portions of the piece of clear glass from item 7-14. So accordingly, the examined portion of the piece of clear glass that I labeled as E from item 3-3 could have originated from the examined portion of the piece of clear glass from item 7-14 or from another source with the same characteristics.
Now, Ms. Hanley, you used a term in there as far as instrumental properties. Can you explain to the jury what that term means and how it relates to your examination in this case?
So the instrumental properties, that's referring to the Grimm analysis that I did. So in comparing the refractive index from 3-3 versus 7-14.
So the clear apparent glass from item 3-2 that was recovered from the scene was a physical match for 6 pieces from 7-12, which were additional glass pieces found from the scene, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah.
So the drinking glass from item 3-2 was a physical match for 6 of the pieces from item 7-12, which was glass recovered from the scene, correct?
Correct.
And then the 2 of the pieces from
Wonder
item
how and
3-3,
why.
or one of the pieces, excuse me, piece E from 3-3, which was from the bumper of the defendant.
This is a little too technical, I think.
With a piece of clear glass from 7-14, which was found on the ground, correct?
Correct.
Now,
And it
Ms.
just
Hanley,
comes
in
out of
addition
to me.
trace analysis that you performed with regards to the glass pieces, what, if any, other excuse me, additional examination did you do with regard to items of debris?
Sure. So I also examined item 3-1 and 7-18.18.
Now, starting with item 7-18.18, what, if any, other description did you have as far as what that item was or where it came from?
So 7-18.18 is scrapings, trace material recovered from the victim's clothing.
And that would be both an orange T-shirt and a gray long sleeve shirt, is that correct?
Correct.
And those particular items, as far as the debris, that was provided to your unit within the lab by whom?
I believe it was Maureen that did the scraping of the clothing and transferred to our unit for further examination.
And that would be Maureen Hartnett, is that correct?
Yes.
And then as far as what, if any, items, the other item was 3-1, is that correct?
Correct.
That was the actual sort of taillight housing from the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, that's
Not
correct.
dented, twisted,
And
broke.
to your notes, who, if anyone, provided that piece of evidence to your unit or to your lab for that comparison?
It shattered all the apparent glass. And
I would have to double check who. I believe it was Maureen, but I'm not. I would have to double check in my.
Go ahead, you can go ahead.
Okay.
prosecutor Botox is added.
Oh,
again.
okay. I'm sorry. It was Trooper Christopher Moore that had that item delivered to the lab.
Now, with reference to item 3-1, the passenger side taillight from the vehicle, what, if any, observations or things did you note in regard to your sort of initial examination of the taillight?
So I did notice that there were portions of the taillight, portions that were clear and red that had broken irregular edges. It appeared to be that there was damage to it.
Now, with reference to your examination just of the taillight now, what, if any, instruments did you utilize in the course of your examination of the taillight?
Sure. So during my examination, I used a stereo zoom microscope, a polarized light
He's
microscope,
got one too.
a comparison microscope, as well as a FTIR with a microscope attachment, and a microspectrophotometer, also known as a microspec.
Now, the GRIM and the FTIR, I believe you've already discussed in your testimony. As far as the microspec is concerned, can you explain to the jury sort of what that instrument is and how it's used and how you used it in this examination specifically?
Sure. So a microspec is used to examine items that have color. So essentially, your sample is exposed to visible light, reacts in a certain way. Some of the light gets absorbed, some of it gets transmitted, and we get a spectrum, and it's representative of the dye or pigment in the sample.
Now, with reference to item 7-18.18, that being the debris from the victim's clothing, what,
That
if
was
any,
all wadded together.
observations or measurements did you take in reference to that particular item?
And took 6 weeks to reach
Sure. So
everybody.
I noted that there was some clear plastic material, as well as some red plastic material. And I would have to refer to my report for exact measurements of those items.
You can go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is this part of the trace debris? We're going to get
So
measurements?
the piece of clear plastic measured approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch. And the largest piece of one of the red plastic pieces measured approximately 1/16 of an inch by less than 1/16 of an inch. And the smallest piece from that measured approximately less than 1/16 of an inch by less than 1/16 of an inch.
As far as measurements go, as far as your examination, as far as the lab is concerned, is 1/16 of an inch sort of the bottom row as far as measurements go?
Yes.
So if something is less than that, it's just sort of noted as less than 1/16 of an inch. Is that correct?
Yes.
And with regard to that debris, the clear and red plastic from the debris, what, if any, examination or what, if any, instruments did you use to conduct your examination just with those pieces?
So I examined a portion of the clear plastic, as well as one of the pieces of the red plastic. I examined them microscopically, and I analyzed portions instrumentally using an FTIR and a microspec.
And based on those examinations, starting with the clear plastic material that you observed, what, if any, conclusions did you come to with reference to comparison of the clear plastic material to the taillight housing?
So the clear plastic
I've zoned out.
from item 7-18.18 was found to be consistent in color and instrumental properties with the examined portion of the clear plastic from the taillight. So accordingly, the clear plastic from 7-18.18 could have originated from the clear plastic from item 3-1 taillight or from another source with the same characteristics.
Now, similarly, with from your examination of the red pieces of plastic in the taillight versus the red pieces of plastic contained within the debris, what, if any, conclusion were you come from your examination of comparison of those items?
Sure. So the examined portions of the red plastic from item 7-18.18 was found to be consistent in color, microscopic appearance, instrumental properties with the examined portions of the red plastic from the taillight, item 3-1. So accordingly, the red plastic from 7-18.18 could have originated from the red plastic
Could have.
from
Not
item
did.
3-1, the
Could
taillight, or from another source with the same characteristics.
Like it makes a difference.
Thank you. May I have one moment, John?
Yes.
Please be done, Lally. Please.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I have no further questions.
Thank goodness.
Actually, Mr. Jackson, before you begin, why don't I see you both sidebar vote?
Jackson will do the cross. I should be fast forwarding through these things.
Okay.
See? I always go too far.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Well, almost afternoon, Ms. Hanley.
Good morning. Yeah.
I'd like to show you a document just to begin our conversation this morning, if I may. May I approach?
Yes.
This has been previously identified as VV, as in Victor Victor. And I'd like to ask you, first of all, to take a look at that and tell me if you generally recognize what that document is.
Was this how we get Proctor's name at the bottom of it? Was that this one? The chain of evidence?
Yes. It appears to be a chain of custody of several items.
Okay, and is that a chain of custody document reflective of the crime lab's case number in this case? Sort of a clumsy question. Do you understand what my question is?
It is the chain of custody for 22-02184.
And is that the case number that the Massachusetts State Crime Lab, Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab is still assigned to this case that you're testifying about today?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've seen reports like this before, correct?
Yes.
They're routinely used in the crime lab to track evidence and maintain chain of custody, at least at the crime lab. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the information contained in the report is entered at or near the time of the event that's memorialized.
Yes.
Okay. And it's relied on generally by the crime lab as a business record, correct? As a record of the events memorialized.
Yes, it's a record of the chain of custody of items within the lab.
Okay, and my question is it relied on by the lab for truth and accuracy, as best you can maintain it, to track items of evidence within the lab?
Yes, it does track items.
And the information contained in the report is presumed by you and other supervisors at the lab to be accurate. Is that right?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of BB as an exhibit.
Objection.
See that? We'll see you at the side.
My gosh. These people. I don't think it's very long, so I'm not gonna mess with it because I'll screw it up. There's something on that report that contradicts what Lally's trying to say and or supports what the defense is saying. Because that's twice now that he has objected to that report going into evidence. Because once it's in evidence,
Are unmuted.
say who signed it.
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, my request at sidebar is reserved.
Yes.
Thank you. May I inquire?
Yes.
Ms. Hanley, I want to draw your attention specifically to the glass pieces that Mr. Lally asked you about. Would you agree that there's a lot of numbers that were discussed, correct?
A lot of
I compared 3-2 to 7-12 and sub A, B, C, and D of 712 were compared with 3-2 and 3-3. A lot of numbers, right?
yes, there are a lot of numbers, items.
Okay, I want to try, if I can, see how well it goes, to clear that up and categorize those.
Sure.
Perhaps, would you agree that we could put the items that you compared and examined in your analysis in 4 categories: 3-2, the cup or the glass; 3-3, the bumper glass; 7-12, the 9 pieces of glass recovered by a trooper named Bukhenik at the scene; and 7-14, a single piece of glass recovered by a trooper named Proctor at the scene. Would you agree that those 4 categories are basically what you analyzed between and among each other?
Yes, there's 4 total items.
Okay. And within those items, there were some subcategories of items in some of those, correct?
Yes, because some of the items just had multiple pieces, so they were labeled just to keep track of the pieces.
Okay. So if I could ask you to take those one at a time, pardon me, 3-2, under that column, visually, that would be a single item, just the cup, correct?
Correct.
3-3, under that single item, the bumper, there would be 5 sub-items, A, B, C, and D, and E.
Yes, that's correct.
Public school education. Under 7-12, the third column, there's 9 pieces, correct? A, B, C, D, E, F as in Frank, I, K, and L are the 9 glass pieces, correct?
Correct.
They're close to being alphabetical, not quite toward the end, right?
Correct. I would have to look at my report for the exact letters, but
Sure, go ahead and look at your report.
so the 9 pieces of clear apparent glass were labeled as A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, and L.
Okay. And then, of course, the last category would be 7-14. That's a single piece of glass that was recovered at the scene by Trooper Proctor, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Objection, Your Honor. Just
So I'm going to see Counsel Ataba for just a minute on this.
Oh, come on. He's helping us understand all the mumbo jumbo that Lally put us through. And what did he call? I don't remember how he called the one thing. Lally wants us to stay confused.
It was a single piece of glass.
You are unmuted.
And that's not,
Yes.
All right. So the last category we were talking about, 7-14, that was a single piece of glass, correct?
That's correct.
that's where Lally
First
objected.
of all, I'm going to ask you to take your comparisons one at a time, if I can. You compared the cup in 3-2 to the 9 pieces recovered at the scene. A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, and L, correct?
Is that 7-12 you're talking about?
7-12. Thank you.
Sorry, can you say the letters again? I just don't know if I heard all of them.
A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, L.
Yes, that's correct.
Of those pieces that I just mentioned, the cup was a match to A, B, C, D, F, and K, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Pieces E and I were compared to each other, and you matched them, correct?
So I believe I'd have to look further in my notes, but I believe E and I were found to fit together by
Physical properties, meaning mechanical properties.
yes, but I would have to check my notes, but I believe it was the previous analyst that looked at 7-12 that found the physical match between E and I.
But that wasn't you?
Is it okay if I look at my
Yes.
notes?
Sure, I don't want to get bogged down, but yes, please.
You know, the three of them look so young. I guess because I'm so old. The three meaning this young lady, Ashley, and Maureen. They're all forensic scientists. Everything else she's found quickly, Nanny. This one she can't.
Okay, so item 7-12 was previously examined by another analyst in the trace unit. Specifically, E and I received, when I opened this item for examination, E and I were
Taped together.
taped together. They were found to have a physical match by the analyst who previously examined the item.
Great. Importantly, E, I, and L, however, were not found to match the cup in 3-2, correct?
That's correct.
All right. You also compared the cup in 3-2 to the 5 items recovered on the bumper in 3-3, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You also analyzed the cup in 3-2 against the 5 items, A, B, C, D, and E, in 3-3, the bumper glass, correct?
So was it the same thing? Why are you hesitating now?
I did examine, I compared item 3-2
With 3-3.
to 2 of the pieces marked as A and B from item 3-3,
And those
which
were
was
deemed not to match the cup, correct?
correct.
And you did not analyze C and D, correct? I'm assuming that's because of size.
So the rest of the items were not used for physical match examination due to size and condition.
So as you sit here, none of the items on the bumper were deemed to match the cup, correct?
Correct.
All right. So you did end up analyzing one of the items on the bumper, item E as an echo, and you analyzed that against the single piece of glass found at the scene in 7-14, correct?
Correct.
And you used both, well, you used a variety, it sounds like, of analyses, including microscopy, UV light, the glass refractive index, GRIM process, correct?
That's correct.
You also used the FTIR, is that right? Infrared spectrometry?
That's incorrect.
Okay, you did not use FTIR in this analysis.
I did not.
Okay, but in the analysis that you did use, you found that there was a match between item E on the bumper and the single piece of glass in 7-14, correct?
They were found to be consistent. They are found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties.
Okay, so importantly, you also compared the single piece of glass in our sort of visual column 4, 7-14, that single piece of glass to the cup. You found that it didn't match, correct?
Correct.
All right. So lastly, you tested the single piece of glass found in the 4th column, 7-14, against the 9 pieces of glass found in 7-12. A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, and L, correct?
I did compare item 714 to item 3-2 and the 9 pieces in item 7-12.
So another way to put that would be you analyze column 4 against column 3 now, correct?
I examined them for a possible physical match.
And they did not match, correct?
There was no physical match to item 714.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach briefly?
Okay. Want to show Mr. Lally what you have?
Sure. I'm looking for the one that was already.
I have to.
I don't have it. May I approach the court magistrate and ask if he's got WW by chance?
No, I do.
Can I borrow that from the court? Thank you. I'd like you to take a look at that document. Just glance it over for a second and let me know when you've had an opportunity to study that.
Okay.
You've taken a look at that single page document?
Yes.
Does that appear to accurately reflect in sort of a visual manner what you just testified to about your analysis of each of these pieces, irrespective of the text on the item, just the analysis of the items specified in that document?
In other words, what we just went through.
I'm not quite sure what. I've never seen this before. I'm not quite sure what.
It's what he was just talking about.
I think you have to move along, Mr. Jackson, for all the reasons we talked about at sidebar.
I understand. My question is a relatively simple one. Is this and if you don't understand something on the document, just say so. Is this a visual representation, an accurate visual representation of what you just testified to in terms of what matched and what didn't match? Where the green matches, the circle with the red through it doesn't match?
I would need to go through my conclusion and compare to confirm.
Fair enough. It is accurate to say, we'll use a cheat sheet for a second. It is accurate to say that the cup was not found to match any items that were found on the bumper. That's correct, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Also, it's fair to say that the piece recovered under 714, the single piece of glass recovered under 714, does not match either the cup, nor does that piece match any of the 9 pieces in 712, correct?
And you can look at your notes if that's easier for you. We just want the right answer, Mr. Jackson, right?
Of course.
So
That's all I want.
take your time with your notes if that's easier for you.
So I'm sorry, can you just repeat the last question that you asked for?
The single piece of glass under 714 neither matches the cup, nor does it match any of the 9 pieces found in 712. In other words, it stands alone.
That is correct.
So that's correct. So
Okay.
714, there was no physical match between 714 and 3-2 or any of the pieces in 7-12.
Thank you for that. And then my final question is, the only piece of material, glass material, that was recovered from the bumper, item E, the only thing that any piece on that bumper matched was the single piece of glass found in 714. Correct?
So piece E from item 3-3 was the piece that I examined microscopically and instrumentally. It was found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties with 7-14.
And that's the only piece of material on that bumper in that section, in other words, in 3-3, that matched anything else in your analysis. A piece that was found singularly at under 714, correct? The only match.
Yes, it was found to be consistent.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Like-
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
It was deposited
Lally?
on the bumper when Karen's car
Ms. Hanley,
met John
within
O'Keefe's car.
item 7-12, there were 9 pieces of glass and 5 pieces of plastic, correct?
Correct.
And as far as a comparison analysis that you're conducting is concerned, why is it, as far as the pieces of plastic are concerned, why is that not part of the comparative analysis?
I did not examine the plastic pieces for physical match because there were no other plastic pieces for comparison for physical match. So I examined the glass pieces for possible physical match.
What are some of the differences between, from an elemental standpoint, as far as plastic versus glass?
Plastic is
Composition is going to be different.
it's a type of polymer. A different type of analysis would be conducted if I was examining plastic versus glass. Something like a plastic, something that we refer to as anisotropic, where glass is isotropic. So they are different types of material.
Now, as far as characteristically speaking, from plastic and or glass, what are some of the commonalities of those items as they're found in general?
Objection.
Beyond the scope?
Yes.
Sustained.
Now,
Yeah.
again, from the drinking glass that was recovered on scene, that was a match for 6 of the pieces of glass that were found on the roadway or on the ground at 34 Fairview Road, correct?
I believe it was 6. I just would have to confirm in my
Go ahead
report.
and you can go ahead and look at your notes.
Yes, it was 6 pieces from 7-12.
And then it was piece E from item 3-3 from the bumper of the defendant's vehicle that was found to be consistent with clear glass that was found on the ground at 34 Fairview Road, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Nothing further.
Anything?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hanley. You are all set. Nope, that can save you. Jim, the one with all the post-it, can you give me that? Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
Oh, I don't know who called next. Can you help me?
Yes, Your Honor. Call Sergeant Uri Bukhenik to the stand.
Okay. And I do
You are
have that
unmuted.
envelope, Mr. Lally. I have it.
Let them tell me how to spell it. Let's see.
You solemnly swear to demonstrate the court and jury in the case out here to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I did.
He's quite comfortable.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, sir. My name is Uri Bukhenik, spelled Y-U-R-I-Y, last of B-U-K-H-E-N-I-K.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed by the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long have you been a trooper with the state police?
Been a trooper since 2012.
And prior to being employed as a trooper with the state police, excuse me, what, if any, other employment or background do you have as far as law enforcement is concerned?
My law enforcement career began in 2003 when I graduated from the military police school in Fort Leonard, Missouri, while I was enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. From there, I was stationed at Quantico, Virginia, with the Marine Corps Presidential Helicopter Squadron. I provided security for the presidential helicopter and assets, attaining a top secret Yankee White clearance. I was promoted meritoriously to corporal and sergeant and had a platoon of 44 Marines. From there, I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, California, where I was a patrol supervisor on base as a military police officer. Once my enlistment ended, I decided to come home and pursue a law enforcement career here in Massachusetts in the communities that I grew up in. I first worked for the VA Hospital Police, where I attained a secret clearance, which was a requirement of the employment. After that, I worked at the Attleboro Police Department in uniform patrol, as well as the SWAT team with Attleboro, Massachusetts Police Department. In 2011, I applied for the Massachusetts State Police, graduated, and worked at the Sturbridge Barracks, Millbury Barracks, and Foxborough Barracks. In 2015, I was selected to come to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office with the detective unit and worked homicide cases as a trooper. 2021, December, I was promoted and took on a supervisory role within the unit.
Now, with respect to your work within the unit of the detective unit at the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, what, if any, specialized training did you receive in regard to your work there?
I've attended numerous homicide conferences, training in various aspects of digital device analysis and investigations in major crimes, homicides, drug investigations, and so forth.
Now, were you working in that capacity with the State Police Detective Unit on January 29th, 2022?
I was.
And were you on call that day?
I was on call as a supervisor.
Now, can you explain to the jury as far as the on-call system within the detective units? Well, let me ask you this first. What, if any, duties or responsibilities do you have as a sergeant or as a supervisor with reference to on-call duty and sort of how that works?
As a supervisor on call, responsibilities include answering the detective that's on call any questions that might arise. Obviously, we don't all have the same experience, so we put our heads together, and if it's a situation or case, a scene that they have not been exposed to before, they call the supervisor for guidance, suggestion, or bounce questions off of them in order to help them navigate that case.
And who was the on-call detective on this particular date of January 29th?
January 29th, the morning hours up until 7 a.m., it was Trooper Michael Proctor.
And do you know Trooper Proctor?
I do.
And how long have you known Trooper Proctor?
Since he came into the office in 2019, I believe it was September, October 2019.
And have you supervised Trooper Proctor sort of throughout his work within the office?
I have supervised him throughout my supervisory position. So his entire time in the office, while I was a supervisor, I've supervised him directly, yes.
And as far as that on-call system or that on-call rotation is concerned, how is that determined, or how does that sort of come into existence?
The on-call system is formulated, it's compiled the month prior. So, for example, if it was December, beginning of December, the troopers in the office would submit their days requesting not to be on call due to trials, training, personal reasons, or vacations they had planned. Those days are submitted in the beginning of the month, and then if it's in the beginning of December, for example, the on-call schedule for January is then compiled a month in advance, really.
So these are generated well in advance of whatever specific date a trooper is on call, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as the detective unit within the North County District Attorney's Office, who, if anyone, is your supervisor?
Currently, my supervisor is Lieutenant Fanning, and the unit commander is Detective Lieutenant Brian Tilley.
In that sort of pecking order, if you will, was that the way that it was set up in January of 2022 as well?
Yes, it was.
Now, on this morning of January 29th, 2022, at some point, do you get a call in the morning, and from whom do you initially get a call?
I received a call approximately 6:44 in the morning or so from the H Troop headquarters, which is the field headquarters for the Metro Boston area, which also covers our county. And they advised me that there was a body in the snowbank in Canton. I asked for further details and advised them that I was not on call, but I would call the on-call trooper and let them know that there was a call out requesting their assistance. So that's what I did. I called Trooper Proctor and advised them to contact Canton Police.
And following that initial contact that you had from the H Troop and then your call to Trooper Proctor, what happened then?
Trooper Proctor began making phone calls, gathering information.
Sustained. Next question.
What was the next thing that happened as far as your involvement was concerned?
I was advised of the circumstances under which the body was located and what was transpiring. And I told Trooper
He couldn't testify to what Trooper Proctor did. That's why the objection. And that's why it was sustained. And he had to go on and ask what he thought, what he did, etc.
Trooper Proctor that I would start shoveling out during the blizzard and then proceed to meet him in Canton to begin our investigation.
And where was it that you and Trooper Proctor first met up on that particular morning?
We met at the Canton Police Department.
And do you recall approximately what time it was that you arrived at the Canton Police Department?
It was approximately 9:15. Due to the amount of snow that was on the ground, the time that it took me to shovel out the main roads, actually no roads were plowed at the time during my track. So I decided to drive my personal truck to Canton Police Department because it was a four-wheel drive and meet Trooper Proctor there.
Now, as far as your personal truck versus you have a work vehicle as well?
That's correct.
You mentioned that the truck is four-wheel drive. What is the difference between your personal truck and its capabilities in weather versus the work vehicle?
Well, at the time, there was approximately 10, 15 inches of snow that had accumulated already. My work vehicle is a sedan, low to the ground, low clearance, front-wheel drive. It would not be able to navigate the road conditions at the time. My four-wheel drive vehicle is higher clearance from the roadway and was able to navigate the conditions at the time.
And sir, when you arrived, so at approximately 8:22 in the morning or so, where is it that you were at that point in time, if you know?
At 8:22, I would say I was still blowing the snow out of my driveway, clearing the path for my truck to leave the driveway.
And when you arrive at the Canton Police Station, you mentioned that you met Trooper Proctor there. Do you recall who arrived first?
Trooper Proctor was in the parking lot in his vehicle, and I pulled in, backed in next to his, and we walked in together into the police department, I believe.
And when you walked into the Canton Police Station on that morning, sometime after 9 a.m., where is it that you went? Who, if anyone, did you talk to when you first got there?
We walked into the police department, were guided to the detective department division of the PD, and we met with the detectives from Canton and Sergeant Good, who was the uniform patrol sergeant and having been a first responder to the scene as well.
Now, without reference to anything that was communicated between the two of you, at some point prior to getting to the Canton Police Station, did you have conversations with Trooper Proctor?
Yes, I did.
And did Trooper Proctor make you aware of conversations that he had with other people prior to getting to the Canton Police Station?
Objection.
No, I'll allow that. That's a yes or no.
Yes.
And so you get to the Canton Police Station, you and Trooper Proctor then proceed to talk to Sergeant Good, is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, without any reference to what was said to you by Sergeant Good, he relayed some information to you as well?
That's correct.
No, I'll allow that.
That's correct.
And if you know about how long was the period of the conversation that you had with Sergeant Good at the Canton Police Station?
The conversation with Sergeant Good was probably 25 to 30 minutes. He walked us through his...
Next question, please, Mr. Riley. I'm going to stop you from answering that, Sergeant.
Yes, Ron.
So, Sergeant Bukhenik, in reference to, at some point, did you learn the name of the body or the person that was found on the lawn on Fairview Road?
Yes, I did.
Who did you learn him to be?
Mr. John O'Keefe.
And
Mr.
in reference,
Officer.
to where Mr. O'Keefe's body was at that point, what, if any, information did you receive about that?
I'll allow that.
We learned that Mr. O'Keefe's body was transported to the hospital, Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And in reference to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, who, if anyone else, were you told had been taken to that facility as well in relation to...
Oh, got to mention Karen Reed.
I'll allow that.
The defendant.
And just to be clear, at some points over the course of your investigation, have you had interactions with Karen Reed?
Yes, I have.
And to be clear, when we say, as far as Karen Reed, the defendant, you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Can you identify just as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's seated between her legal defense team wearing the white blouse.
Your Honor, does that record reflect identification of the defendant?
Yes.
So upon having that conversation with Sergeant Good at the Canton Police Station, where is it that you and Trooper Proctor went next?
From the Canton Police Department, we proceeded to the McCabe residence.
And that was over on Country Lane, is that correct?
That's correct, number 12, Country Lane.
And when you arrived there, as far as transportation to that, is it you and Trooper Proctor in the same vehicle?
Yes, I made the decision to drive us. That way we only take one vehicle. In addition to Trooper Proctor being able to make phone calls and facilitate other logistics as necessary, allowed him that freedom to do so while I operated the vehicle in the dangerous snow conditions.
And the snow conditions that you were talking about as far as clearing out the driveway, the drive to the Canton Police Station, did those conditions persist throughout the day of the 29th?
Yes, they did.
And so you make your way over to the McCabe residence, again, without anything that was said. Who, if anyone, did you speak with at the McCabe residence that morning?
We first spoke with Miss Jennifer McCabe. We then spoke with Mr. Matt McCabe. And then we spoke with Mr. Brian Albert.
And with reference to each of those conversations, were they done collectively or separately, or how were those interviews conducted?
Each interview was conducted separately. We first interviewed Miss Jennifer McCabe with request of Mr. McCabe to give us privacy. He proceeded upstairs. Once we were done with that interview, Mr. McCabe came downstairs and Miss McCabe gave us the same courtesy. And once that interview was over, Mr. Brian Albert had arrived and we interviewed him briefly.
Is that sort of the typical process of how at least your unit conducts interviews with respect to civilians?
Yes, with cooperating civilians, we typically advise them we schedule an interview. We proceed to their location of convenience and separate them and get their version of recollection of events that we are inquiring about.
Now, after you spoke with those three individuals, so yourself and Trooper Proctor at the McCabe residence, where is it that you and Trooper Proctor went next?
We proceeded to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And where within the Good Samaritan Hospital did you go?
We went to the emergency department.
And within the emergency department, were you led to a specific room?
Yes, we were.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you were in that room?
Once in the room, we observed Mr. O'Keefe's body on the medical bed or gurney. And his clothing, which had been cut off of him, were on the floor at the foot of the bed, a couple of feet away at the foot of the bed.
Now, first, with regard to the clothing, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
After viewing Mr. O'Keefe's body, we proceeded to identify the clothing items and bag them into evidence bags, notating which item and a brief description about each item of clothing.
Let me ask you just a little bit about that as far as that process is concerned. So when an item of evidence is collected by you or by your units during the course of an investigation, is there sort of a policy or protocol, or how are things, what do you do with things when you collect them and take them into custody and evidence?
If we deem an item to be of evidentiary value, we identify the item, we take a brief description of it, and we label the evidence bag with that description. We notate who's taking the item into custody, typically who located the item, the time that it's located, and the location from which it was seized or taken or collected.
And with regard to items of clothing, is that something that would be placed in just one big bag of clothes, or like how would those be packaged in evidence?
They should be in the
Mr. O'Keefe's clothing, which was already in one big pile on the floor, we packaged all.
Okay, jurors, feel free to stand up and stretch.
It's stretch time. Yay, it's stretch time. For the jury, anyway. I'm not going back just yet because the camera is focused on John's mother, who is visibly upset. Okay, they moved away. Now they're focusing on Karen. But still, these people drive me crazy.
And so I'm sorry, Sergeant Bukhenik, when you come into the hospital room where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, there's clothing items that are on the floor, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall how those clothing items were in relation to each other, in relation to the floor?
They were positioned on the floor in a pile stacked on top of each other, and they were in the condition of being soaking wet.
And with respect to those clothing items, do you recall what those clothing items were individually?
Yes, sir.
And what were
They were a plaid pair of boxer underwear. It was a orange colored design print t-shirt. It was a blue pair of Lucky Brand jeans, a belt, two-tone gray, light, thin hooded sweatshirt, and a right sneaker, black in color with white design and a Nike brand.
And how many sneakers were there contained within that property?
One right sneaker.
And what, if any, observations did you make of the condition beyond them being soaking wet?
I also recognized, due to the aroma and visual observations, traces of vomit on the clothing.
And with regard to those items that you observed on the floor, what, if anything, did you and or Trooper Proctor do with reference to those clothing items?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Once we went through the clothing, we collected each item and put it into a large evidence bag. We double bagged it due to the wetness of the clothing, so it would not seep through. We also identified the fact that there was only one sneaker. So I requested that Trooper Proctor contact the paramedics that transported Mr. O'Keefe from 34 Fairview to the hospital and have them once again check their ambulance to see if there was another sneaker inadvertently left behind in the ambulance vehicle.
Now, prior to sort of physically touching this or any other piece of evidence, what, if any, other sort of precautions do you take prior to handling, tactile handling any piece of evidence?
Anytime we handle evidence, which obviously we take great caution not to destroy, alter, or discard any evidence, we also put on gloves in order to help preserve that item.
Double bagged. I'm wondering
In
if it was
reference
still
to
double bagged
these
when it
items
reached
or items,
the lab 6 weeks later.
anything of evidentiary value that you seize as evidence, once you take it and secure it into an evidence bag, what happens to it from there?
Once it's secured in the evidence bag, it is sealed and logged into our evidence storage facility at the office. And then as necessary, it is signed out, shipped off for processing, review, or court proceedings.
And as far as that sealing is concerned, how are bags or boxes of items of evidentiary value, how are they sealed?
Once the bag is,
I'll allow it. I'll
What?
allow it.
thank you, Your Honor. Once the bag is sealed, we utilize tape, typically red or yellow tape. Once it's secured, we initial and date the tape on the edge. That procedure helps identify the time and date it was sealed and by who with the initials.
And then once that bag or box is sealed, if that bag or box is subsequently opened at a later time, what, if any, notation or what, if any, recordation of that is made?
Anytime a piece of evidence is signed out for review, it's logged in the tracking system. In addition, anytime a piece of evidence is open, with a container being the bag or a box is open and the tape is cut, it is then resealed, reinitialed, and dated by the trooper or an individual who's signing that evidence out and then returning it.
As far as the evidence bag or box is concerned, when it's been opened, is that something that is noticeable based on the sealing and resealing of that particular receptacle?
Yes, sir. It is definitely noticeable, and it's noted in the systems.
Now, with regard to, you mentioned or made some mention earlier in the testimony in regard to evidence storage facilities at your office.
Yes.
Can you describe what those are and who, if anyone, has access to those evidence storage areas?
Within our office, we have 2 troopers that are designated as evidence officers. Those individuals have access to the secure rooms designated strictly for evidence storage. Those rooms are inventoried and kept under not just lock and key, but also digital access control and alarm systems. They are the only ones that have access to those facilities, in addition to our unit commander. But I'll tell you that our unit commander does not access that room without the evidence officers. I myself, even as a supervisor, do not have access to that room.
You don't have access to that evidence room, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is Trooper Proctor, is he one of those evidence officers? Does he have access to that room?
He does not.
As far as that time in January of 2022, who were the troopers within your office who did have access to that?
In January 2022, that would be Trooper Jeff Kakowski and Trooper David DeChico.
And that would be in addition to Lieutenant Tully, is that correct?
Detective Lieutenant Tully, I believe, has access to it, but I cannot speak to that. I just believe that he does, as a unit commander, to facilitate any next assignment.
Now, with reference to any items that you were physically present for that were taken into custody or taken into evidence, including that clothing from the hospital on January 29th and any other items throughout the course of this investigation, when they were taped and sealed, what happened with each of those items once they were taken back to your office?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Each item that was sealed, it was processed in, it was logged in, and then it was stored after processing. It was stored in the evidence room.
Now,
What
going
items?
back to the Good Samaritan Hospital, within that
Were
hospital
stored.
room, you made mention that you secured items and that you made observations of Mr. O'Keefe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you describe for the jury, as far as Mr. O'Keefe's body, what were those observations that you made?
Mr. O'Keefe's body was laying on
Officer
his
O'Keefe.
back. The observations I made were of bruising to the eyelids of his face. Based on my experience and having cases with head trauma, I can tell you that during subdural hematoma,
Yeah, I'll sustain the objection. You can build a foundation if you can, Mr. Lally.
Over the course of your work with this unit in particular, if you know about how many homicide or let me step into it this way. As far as your work within this unit, as far as it's concerned, what, if any, jurisdiction does the State Police Detective Unit of the District Attorney's Office have with reference to not only homicide but death investigations within Norfolk County?
by statute, Chapter 38, Section 4, each county, the district attorney's office is provided jurisdiction over all death investigations. As a result, the law enforcement entities that are assigned to that Norfolk or that district attorney perform the investigations. In Norfolk County, those individuals are members of the Massachusetts State Police assigned to the State Police Detective Unit within our office.
And so as far as death investigations, what exactly or what type of investigations would that encompass?
Death investigations that we have jurisdiction over are all unattended deaths. Unattended death means that a physician, a doctor, is not overseeing the individual that passes. Those deaths would be suicides, homicides, overdose type deaths, natural deaths, accidental deaths, and so forth. Any type of death that is not overseen by a doctor at a medical facility or in a hospice type situation.
So as a result of your assignment to this unit and that sort of exclusivity of jurisdiction over unattended deaths within Norfolk County, if you know approximately how many death investigations have you been a part of over the course of your work with the State Police Detective?
Over the last 9 years, I would venture to say it's over 500 death investigations that I was a part of.
I have to pause here because my little four-legged, all of the legs are being crossed. So we will be right back. Well, baby feels better. She actually stretched out. Bright sunshine right now. They're expecting thunderstorms sometime today. Okay. Can we just go lay in the sunshine for a while? No. Alrighty, let's get back to the trial.
And Sergeant, over the course of your involvement within those investigations, if you know, how many of those investigations involved some indication or some type of head trauma?
Scores of investigations that involve some sort of head trauma.
And through the course of your investigations, in those cases that have involved scores of head trauma, have you been privy to information as far as medical findings, autopsy reports, things of that nature in relation to those prior investigations?
Yes, sir, I have been.
Now, with regard to your observations of Mr. O'Keefe, with regard to his eyelids, what if any observations did you make, and what if any? Well, let me start just with the physical observations. What if any physical observations did you make of Mr. O'Keefe's face and body in general?
His face, I observed the swelling and the discoloration being produced through the blood pooling in the eyelids.
Yep, so just your observation, so the swelling and discoloration. I'll strike the remainder of what you've said.
I also observed a cut to his nostril and an eyelid, which was very small in size, which would have been produced by a...
Objection.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. Next question, Mr. Lally.
Based on your training experience, what if any conclusions or what if any opinions that you have in regard to the swelling around the ears?
Objection.
Yeah, I'll see you at sidebar here.
Yeah. Knock it off, Lally. You know what the situation is. He's not a medical doctor. Well, that didn't take long.
Yes.
So, Sergeant Bukhenik, with reference to your prior death investigations, have you had occasion to make observations of bodies that there was a later determination of some sort of subdural hemorrhage?
Yes.
I'll allow that. Have you made those observations? Have you been part of those investigations?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
And what you observed in regard to Mr. O'Keefe, was that consistent or inconsistent with what you had observed on those prior investigations?
Objection.
That I'll allow.
It was consistent.
Now, in addition to the injuries that you observed to Mr. O'Keefe's face, what, if any, injuries did you observe to his extremities?
His extremities produced abrasions to his upper forearm and lower bicep area on his right arm.
And just as you use that term, I'm not asking for any sort of medical definition, but as far as you use that term abrasions, what do you understand that term?
I understand that term to be a injury sustained through blunt force trauma or friction to the epidermis of the skin, where a crushing of the vascular system occurs and produces that type of
Those were
sign on the skin.
That wasn't an abrasion.
And from your
Those-
observation of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's arm, which arm was this again?
It was his right arm.
And as far as your observation of those injuries to his right arm, what, if any, as far as the consistency of those injuries, what, if anything, did you note or observe in reference to those?
Objection.
Consistency with what? With the
Let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
How were the abrasions that you're describing positioned in relation to each other?
Each abrasion appeared to me to be linear and concentrated in a specific location on the arm. It didn't go any further north of a point and did not go any further south.
They didn't
of a
go
point.
north-south. They went
So it was
across.
concentrated in the elbow, a few inches below the elbow, a few inches above the elbow on the right arm.
Now, while you were at the Good Samaritan Hospital, did you endeavor to speak with Ms. Reed?
We did attempt to, yes.
And was she present at the hospital at that time?
No, she was not.
And at some point subsequent to that, did you receive, or what, if any, information did you receive as to her whereabouts?
We were made aware that she was located at 345 Country Hill Drive in Dayton at her parents' home.
And where did you go from the Good Samaritan Hospital once you left from there?
We proceeded to that location.
Now, sir, with reference to the items of clothing that you recovered from the Good Samaritan of Mr. O'Keefe's, do you have those items of clothing with you here today in court?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to retrieve those items and display those items.
Okay, are they in the courtroom?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, yes,
May I approach?
yes.
Oh, yeah, right. Make a good show of it.
How many items are we talking about? Okay. Jurors, if we go a little past one, my intention would be to still just take a half-hour lunch today and come back. So I'd rather just go through this if we could.
Sergeant, presenting you with this item, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
The sweatshirt from the hospital room where Mr. O'Keefe was located.
And
The
you're on
t-shirt
call
in
to
there
introduce
too.
and admit that as the next exhibit.
Okay, any objection, Mr. Jackson?
Sort of need to see what's in the bag before I can object, but on
So-
principle, no.
Okay, all right, so you've received photos of all of this, right?
I assume what's in the bag is what's been photographed, but until I see it, I won't know.
All right, so let's go ahead and open it.
With the court permission?
Yes.
So they received the two items together, but then afterwards they've got them separated, I guess. And this is from the lab. Sweatshirt.
No objection.
So Lally, why don't you come take the bag?
Yeah, Mr. Lally.
Yes.
Put it back in the bag.
It's in evidence, and we'll put that back in the bag.
437.
Okay.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I need you another item, sir. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
Says it's a one orange T-shirt.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, if the witness could remove that item and display it for the jury as well.
Yes.
Again, the lab received it together with the other item in one bag. So this is after the lab did all their stuff. They packaged them separately. And that's the back. Why didn't you show the other side?
No objection.
Ooh, Jackson is the one who's going to be doing the cross. This will be good.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Another item, sir. Do you recognize that?
Yes, it's the right sneaker recovered from the hospital room.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, if the witness could remove that item from
Yes.
the bag. Display for the jury.
No, that went to the lab too. So it's not just the hospital.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Curiouser and curiouser. Looks pretty pristine.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Yes, thank you, sir. If you could return that to the back, please. I'll introduce in minutes. Your Honor.
Yes, I'm going to look.
No objection.
Thank you.
May I approach one last time? My apologies.
Your Honor, I guess I should have said no objection with what we discussed.
I understand.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness again?
Yes.
One last item from that set. Do you recognize that?
Pants.
Yes, it's a bag containing a blue jeans, black belt, and plaid boxer shorts.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness remove just the jeans and the belt from the back?
Yes.
So who's going to seal these back up? Now turn the other side. That's the back. Can we see the front, please? No, don't show the front, because somebody noticed a long string of blood, like if somebody got hit in the nose. And he was very careful.
Thank you, sir.
With the sweatshirt, he showed front and back. With the t-shirt, he only showed the back.
Okay.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. So are you not displaying the third item, but it's going into evidence? Or is it just the jeans and the belt going into evidence?
The jeans and the belt into evidence, Your Honor, with the court's permission.
So we can mark the bag and we'll remove the third item during a break. Thank you. All right, so Sergeant, you'll be with us this afternoon. Why don't we take our lunch and recess? It's only going to be about half an hour.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so folks, we'll see you back here, let's say no later than 1:40,
Okay.
okay?
Court, all rise for jury.
Okay.
You are muted.
Okay. What am I doing? I'm pausing that. And I'm going to this. Hello. Well, looks like it's time for lunch, which is going to be just in time. I have an appointment. And then we'll come back. So, I don't know. My spidey sense is way off. Because these people, when they first come on the stand, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that about it. But then the more and more they go on, especially when the defense comes up there. And then when I watch other people and their reactions, they're going, I didn't react that way. So when Uri first came on, because I'm not even going to try to say his last name, was very professional and to the point and whatever. But when he started trying to slide in, well, that's because of, the trauma does this. And it's feeding right into everything that the prosecution is trying to say instead of just the facts. And if they need more information, they'll ask for it. There was something that I was surprised at. Oh, at the hospital, they double bagged the items because they were wet. Did they arrive out of the evidence locker double bagged still and now moldy and damp? Well, they wouldn't still be damp after 6 weeks before they went on to the lab. Were they still double bagged? Had the seal been broken? Tully, Fanning, and I think there's one other, had access to the evidence room. Tully's name has come up before. I don't recall where, but I remember hearing that name before. And then there's a new person who I hadn't heard. I don't think it was Tully, Fanning. It was somebody else that I can't find offhand. And every time they went through the chain of custody and tried to get it into evidence, Lally objected. Why? It's a piece of evidence. It's what they went by. It's their chain of custody. And Lally objected every time. The glass. The bumper glass matched that big single piece of glass. And I'll lay odds it almost, well, now I'm not sure. I was going to say I'll lay odds that happened when Karen's car hit John O'Keefe's car. And that's how it landed on the bumper. But not after traveling for 60 minutes in a blizzard. It would still be on the bumper. Explain that one to me. No, not with all the jostling and stuff that it went through. Everything was just laying there. Just laying there. A little accident fairy went around dusting everything, along with the hair that's on the side of the vehicle that has no reason to just be there. After, again, a 60-mile trip in a blizzard with wind and rain and snow and all that other crap coming down. And there's too much suspicious stuff going on that on the first look is okay, that's reasonable. But then you take a second look at it and you're going, I don't know about that. There's something off here. So we'll find out when we come back in the afternoon and discover what's really going on. Okay. So, having said that, take a break. Get something to eat. I'm going to. Run around your backyard. Go smell a rose. Go on something that I watched. They said they were angry crocheting. Do whatever you want to do. So I'll be back. If I can remember what buttons I'm supposed to push now, because we know I do this wrong every single time. So that's Karen. Wrong. That's what I was looking for. There's that. So we'll catch up with you on the other side of the break.